Hey guys, back with you again. So, I'm going to talk a little bit about rear main seals, and it's pretty straightforward. There's 1,000 videos on YouTube and everywhere else on how to do this. I might do it a little bit differently, but that mainly comes from my experience in building other engines, especially Pontiacs. They require a little bit more finesse, hand fitting, a little bit more time involved. Small block Chevy is about as easy as it gets to do for a rear main seal, but there's still a couple steps that I do take to ensure that I don't have rear main seal oil leaks for a long time. I really can't stand oil leaks, especially when I know that most of the time they're preventable. A little bit of seepage isn't a big deal, but I really I don't like seeing OPEC disasters everywhere I park, so try to keep the environment clean as much as possible. Anyways, so on these type of rear main seals, Velcro, very common. One of the things that I do is on this ridge here, the seal guide where the seal sits, I'll take just a very finite amount of Right Stuff silicone, and I will place it, just wipe it with my finger on the back of this all the way around and at the parting lines for the main cap, and a tiny little bit on the seal ends. Not much, just a very small amount. Don't want to create obstructions or other issues. Basically, what that does is it makes sure no oil can leak behind the seal and out. It normally doesn't on small block Chevys, but it can. So I'm just avoiding problems later. You'll see a lot that people will install the seal offset, and I do the same thing. It doesn't have to be a whole lot, but it's better when the parting line isn't the same as the main cap parting line. Just a little bit less chance to get leak there, especially if you have a lot of blow by or something like that, or if you're not rebuilding a motor but it's a used motor and you're just putting a rear main seal in. It's good to have that offset. A couple other little things that I wanted to talk about real quick. You'll notice on the thrust on this number 5 main bearing, you see how on the thrust parting line it does not come all the way up to the edge here. Now, I've been doing this for a long time, and I'd actually never seen a set of main bearings that came like this from the manufacturer, but I've been doing this for a long time to introduce on higher horsepower engines more oil to the thrust surface. And it's totally fine. It doesn't cause any reliability issues, any kind of deal like that, but I thought that was a neat little deal that I would show you guys. I actually will grind this into them, especially Pontiacs, other motors that I work on, build pretty much anything that's high horsepower, especially stick cars that have, they're running pretty fast and they place a lot of pressure on that thrust. You want to get, as much oil flow there as possible. I've seen guys that cut grooves from the center oil groove out to the thrust. I don't do that personally. I think you can do it this way without disturbing the oil that goes right to the surface of the main bearing. So this is just the way I choose to do it. Some guys will enlarge oil holes or anything. I don't mess with them unless there is a obvious huge mismatch. You have 60 pounds of pressure forcing oil in there. You're going to get oil in that journal unless it's really blocked off. So unless it's blocked off, I don't really mess with those, especially on a Chevy motor. They have a fairly good oiling system from the factory. One thing that's unique to these Goodwrench and some aftermarket blocks is you'll have dipstick on both sides of the engine. I'm going to be using this side in my truck. The tube's a guide to help the dipstick go straight down without running into the main cap or anything else. Just kind of straightens it out. But this side over here is just an open hole. Sure, you can plug it off. There's other ways to do it, but what I do is I take an 1/8 inch MPT pipe tap and I tap it from the top here coming down, not the bottom going up, and then I'll put an 1/8 inch NPT plug in this side of it, and that'll just block off that hole. And that's just a way to keep that from, you know, spitting oil everywhere. One other thing on a small block Chevy that is unique to Chevy motors is you have your fuel pump eccentric, or your fuel pump push rod, and it goes through this hole at this angle, and it rides on the fuel pump lobe on the cam. Well, there's a bolt hole right here. You got to be careful, because this hole goes all the way through to that push rod. If you use a bolt that's too long, like you have a motor plate or something on here, you really got to make sure it's not too long and it doesn't hit the the push rod for the fuel pump, because you'll destroy it pretty quick. But either way, you'll want to put a short bolt in there to at least block off. I've seen some oil leaks come from people not having a bolt in there, so just a 3/8 coarse thread short little bolt to block off the hole so you don't have a mess all over your driveway. And then I got the main bearings are installed, cam is installed and lubed up. You can see I use a liberal amount of cam lube. I prefer a high pressure graphite type lube compared to, like, say, some of the red lubricants out there that are very thin. I've had no luck with those, so I try to take every precaution I can on a break-in, and so I use a high pressure graphite lube, and it stays on the cam really well even after adjusting the valves and you turn it over the motor a few times. And the stuff I used for this build is it's an Iski Rev Lube with moly sulfide, and yeah, should work pretty well. So anyways, I'm going to get to installing this crankshaft, and I'll let you guys see how it turns when I'm done.